Scythe Tleppo, Chapter 7. At home, I expected life to stabilize. Good grades meant a better home life. At least that's what I thought from watching TV programs. They didn't go very far in my mother's eyes, though. Good grades, learning about the WOG world, were next to meaningless to her. Scientology courses were the focus of education in my early life, and she wanted to make sure it continued that way. I made non-Scientologist friends, and that was something she needed to keep an eye on, too. My mom transitioned to a new career working from home, doing graphic design for Scientology companies. My Aunt Arlene, meanwhile, failed in the Sea organization when her obesity interfered with her productivity. Rather than get her health under control, she chose to leave the Sea Org and avoid productivity altogether. She sold super blue-green algae, a superfood, in a multi-level marketing scheme. It wasn't long before she had everyone in the family on enormous doses of dried algae, including me, though I protested from time to time. My mother joined in the venture, then my grandmother, everyone. To me, it seemed like a fake job selling a bogus product. Isn't production the basis of morale, like Lafayette said? Are they producing anything? Why is everyone in this family so eager to slide by with minimal effort? I was disappointed by the new algae phase, but I didn't rock the boat too much. There were already a lot of alternative treatments in the midst. It was nothing out of the ordinary. Aunt Sharon had remarried when I was younger to Jake Lekowskis, another Jew-turned-Scientologist. Jake's brother Harry was a chiropractor. Alternative doctors that primarily focus on the alignment of bones in the spine, but often on other pseudoscientific medicines like homeopathy. Harry practiced applied kinesiology, an alternative allergy treatment which has been repeatedly refuted by mainstream science. Chiropractors are very popular in Scientologist communities. In fact, all alternative medicines and treatments are, while psychiatry and psychology are considered the ultimate enemies of spiritual freedom. Companies like Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical giant, are the epitome of suppressive organizations. No Scientologist will ever recommend a psychiatric drug to another person, except under the direst of circumstances. Even then, it's exceptionally rare. These suppressive companies control medical doctors and hospitals. The medical community prescribes drugs at the whims of the psychiatric overlords, who want only to suppress the population. Scientology's culture raises alternative medicines and treatments to the status of life-saving and actively pushes them. My Aunt Arlene touted blue-green algae as a miracle-working super medicine. It just didn't seem to do anything. It felt phony to me. I did buy into the chiropractic treatment that I received, though. Aligning my spine seemed a useful thing to do, even if I didn't get all the amazing effects from it. I thought there was something wrong with me for a while, but eventually became used to everyone in the family telling me how wondrous and effective everything was, while I didn't experienced similar effects. My family members echo-chambered everything they heard, a kind of self-hypnosis effect. They took in everything they heard from others, while I was more conservative about what I let in. I was less certain. Jake and Sharon lived in New York, so I rarely saw them. Jake wasn't blood family to me, but we got along well. Mostly, though, family life was comprised of just me and my mother. My grandmother was around occasionally, and less often my aunt and cousin. My life was all Scientology all the time. Dunedin Academy, on the other hand, was mine. School was the thing I could do that wasn't influenced by Scientology. I studied and thrived there. I discovered a purpose. At home, my life was evolving, as was I. Puberty brought hormones and intensity to my deeper thoughts, which ramped me up markedly. Chicago. I started listening to Marilyn Manson, a new band I saw on the Box television station. When I saw him sing Lunchbox, I bought into his message, and after acquiring his cassette, Portrait of an American Family, I dove in. Night after night, I listened to the songs. Somehow this Marilyn Manson character knew what was wrong with the world. He understood suffering and pain, and his persona embodied it. His darkness spoke to the darkness I felt brewing in me. I identified with him so deeply, his music became a release and constant source of strength. There was a new male energy in my home now, too. I broadened my tastes in the music landscape with bands like KMFDM, Prick, My Life, and the Thrill Kill Cult, and other underground music. My 12th year was of exploration of the dark. I dressed in black clothing and pondered the past, loneliness, my crazy life, and the darkness inside. I yearned to meet Marilyn Manson and Trent Reznor. Only they could understand me. I balanced my dark life with the newer, positive life of school. My mother sent me away during the summer of 1994 to live with a Scientologist power couple in Chicago. The husband and wife team were auditors and case supervisors. Case supervisors are the managers and brains behind the auditor. They guide the auditing and direct the entire process. My mom wanted them to audit me because they were cheaper than Nearby Flag, even with the flights. I got some sessions from them, but I was distracted by the new environment. They didn't have the strict rules my mother had. They let me walk around the city without supervision. They treated me like a free adult. I explored the part of Chicago we were in, stumbled on shops with sex toys, chain wallets, and heavy metal shirts. I bought my first Marilyn Manson shirt and painted my nails black. I became more like that which I idolized. I felt so free. After a few weeks of my summer vacation, the power couple realized I didn't have an interest in auditing, so they sent me home. They weren't bent out of shape. They felt people shouldn't practice Scientology unless they sincerely wanted to. Why doesn't my mom feel that way? When I returned home, my mother made me scrub off the black polish from my nails, and she tore my Marilyn Manson shirt to pieces while I was at school. There was something empowering about wearing that shirt, possibly the words on the back, "I am the God of F." I felt different and special wearing that, different than others, but truer to myself. She said I was being out of balance. A Scientology term meaning I was taking on another's personality. I suppose she wasn't wrong, but I viewed it as reflecting my personality. After all this freak stuff, reflected how I felt, not the boring, generic clothes I had been wearing, certainly not a school uniform. You better believe that I got another one of those shirts. There was no fighting it anymore. Changes had been brewing in me for a long time, and I was ready to repeat myself properly to the world, represent myself properly to the world. Decoupled. In school, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula. I read The Scarlet Letter, Moby Dick, Frankenstein. I found the archaic writing style interesting and enriching. I felt culture was finally at the gate, and I was doing my best to let it in. I was expanding, growing. My mother's influence with her dogma and unwavering dependence on Lafayette was shrinking. She who had been my whole life seemed more and more like a woman without companionship working strange jobs, preaching Scientology without any real evidence of its efficacy. She was increasingly overweight and unhealthy, yet exuded confidence. No one in the family encouraged her to lose weight, just to eat more algae. Scientology solves all problems. There's no need to exercise. She was my everything once, but as I confronted my past, she shrunk. I distanced myself more from Scientology with manufactured excuses about school. I expressed the most general lack of interest I thought I could get away with. My grades were perfect, and home life was generally acceptable. The pressure to go into session plateaued and then declined for the first time in my life. I stopped accepting my mother's answers to life as readily as before. They felt like desperate attempts at control to me. I saw her as indoctrinated, fooled by Lafayette. The axioms of Scientology didn't fit my observations in life anymore. I tried to apply its technology in my life. It just didn't work. I didn't specifically think Scientology principles were wrong. I simply didn't care if they were right or wrong. I decided I didn't need self-help, just like my grandpa. Investigation. My mother came to meet Mr. Yu randomly one day while I was waiting for her to pick me up. Normally, I walked out to her car. This time, she came into the classroom. She asked him questions about who he was and some strange personal questions. She was disagreeable with him, and her behavior signaled to me something strange was going on. She seemed standoffish for some reason. She left a bad impression on him, I also noticed. The next day, when I spoke to him, he admitted to being caught off guard and unsure about the encounter. I didn't think about it much, though. She had acted out of character. What can she do, I mean? I'm a perfect student. I'm achieving. It wasn't until I went to flag for a session weeks later that I was sent to the ethics officer and found out what happened. I was informed I needed to get a sec check, an interrogative security check interview, administered to individuals suspected of crimes. Isn't that great when your mom turns you in? This is why some of these Scientology parents need their children taken away. It's a fact. I hesitantly agreed. I had done this so many times before. What's one more? My sec check was custom tailored this time. Rather than the usual list of general crimes, I noticed the auditor didn't spend much time with the questions until he started asking about Mr. Yu indirectly. He asked about homosexual activities with teachers or others. Wow. He asked about molestation and other peculiar things. Exasperated, I got through the questions and managed to not storm out. I later found out my mother wrote a knowledge report on Mr. Yu and sent it to the Scientology organization. In it, she claimed he might be a homosexual and that she had concerns about his relationship with me. Suggesting someone might be a homosexual is not a joke in Scientology. It is no compliment and no joke. Scientology views homosexuals as being 1.1 on the tone scale. They like pedos, though. It's numbered chart on the emotional states of people. Lafayette calls the 1.1 tone covert hostility and describes them as sulking cowards. He would know one day. That should be taken from the society as rapidly as possible and uniformly institutionalized. Lafayette and his followers are so anti-psychiatry. A recommendation of institutionalization is the worst possible condemnation. I think that was just all manipulation. There was no indication of that. She thought we were having a love affair, or at the very least, he was a danger to me. This was so offensive to me, I could barely contain myself. Who is she to make these crazy accusations? She didn't even talk to me. She sent the written accusations to corporate Scientology so they would put them in my permanent folder, but that wasn't the only reason. She sent the KR to Scientology also, that if Mr. Yu ever became a Scientologist, the report would be there. If Mr. Yu ever becomes a Scientologist, even in a future lifetime, there will be a report in his folders accusing him of being gay, which he will have to deal with. That's the thought process. That makes sense to them. I was associated with a situation completely imagined by my mother. This was an absolute betrayal of my trust. Of course, there wasn't anything strange going on. Can't someone be good at their job and like me as an individual? She wanted complete control of him. That's why she did that. I lost a lot of respect for my mother when she attacked the one person in my life who was giving me useful, good, positive pressure. It was further evidence that my needs and health were second to Scientology in her mind. Scientology's grip on my mind was loosening. Bliss. I continued to learn from Mr. Yu, and my perfect grades continued. Despite the attack from my mother, I wrote in cursive, read books, studied music, biology, and math. Mr. Yu and I had stimulating intellectual conversations about the nature of science, space, exploration, and the relationship between math and music. He called me the smartest kid he had ever taught, which I viewed as an honor, as high praise. I was proud of my accomplishments and of my progress. I wanted more non-Scientology progress. I impressed Mr. Yu by shining in his class, but he impressed me more. I respected his opinions because his standards never wavered. I was trying hard and getting results. At the end of the 8th grade, my standardized test scores were well into college level for all subjects. And then they named me the junior high valedictorian. Me. It was a surreal but much needed accolade. I had skipped preschool, 2nd grade, and 5th grade. I was kicked out of kindergarten in 4th grade before the first half of the year, and I finished around 3/4 of 1st, 3rd, and 6th grades. My 7th and 8th were the first 2 grades I had ever completed, and they were done at a private non-Scientology school. I felt validated and powerful for the first time. See, that's what his mother didn't want. I felt for the first time that my efforts could shape my life. What I was doing was directly affecting my experience. I wanted my time in Mr. Yu's class to last forever. Freshman. Dunedin Academy is a K-12 school, meaning it has every grade from kindergarten through senior level high school. In late 1995, my first year of high school started. I was 13, turning 14 soon. High school was a new situation. Classes took place in various areas on campus with different teachers. I only had Mr. Yu for a couple of hours each day. I hadn't had many experiences with the teachers of the new classes. I hadn't even met them all, and some of the teachers were new. I didn't do as well studying under the other teachers as I did under Mr. Yu. The high school students took over the classes. Not Mr. Yu's class, though his class was like a military squad, just how I liked it. I enrolled in nearly every after-school elective class Mr. Yu taught. I knew the only time I would learn was under his guidance. He didn't view the world how I saw it. He didn't know he was the best teacher in the world, but I did. His attitude about my different classes was nonchalant and patient. I felt my only chance at accomplishment and success sliding away from me. Just one short summer after I was crowned valedictorian. It was slipping away so quickly. I fell into a panic. I felt like the only person in the world unhappy to enter high school. I wanted to be back in the 8th grade where things made sense. Trying to learn in high school was about as uncool as it got. Studying, answering questions, or participating in class were signs of being at the bottom of the totem pole in the other kids' minds. No girls would ever talk to me. The boys said I was the biggest nerd, and they treated me that way. They took pride in calling me a nerd. Hell, I was a nerd. That never mattered to me before because I was a nerd who was accomplishing things. High school for me was a different story. During one class, a student threw me out of the first-story window. He received no punishment. The teacher didn't even reprimand him. Another teacher, a full-grown man, didn't do anything when another student threw a book at him. It was madness. The sudden absence of discipline and structure in my classroom life caused an explosion of instability. The shockwaves rippled out to my home life. I fell into my pit of the past again. My mind further darkened. The constant buzz of activity and devotion to learning I had the school year before fizzled just as quickly as it had come. Scientology couldn't help me, and my mother refused to take me out of the school. My mother ignored my cries for change. I wouldn't be successful in high school without some kind of change. Of that I was sure. Tleppo. At the time, our neighbors were a young married couple with the last name Opelt. My mother let me hang out with them a few times, but as soon as she found out they occasionally smoked weed, they were out of our lives. The Opelts named their black cat Tleppo, the inverse of their family name. I peered into the cat's eyes and fell in love with the name. Immediately, it was stellar, literally out of this world. Tleppo was dark, perfect somehow. I kept the name in my mind. Tleppo, it's like Prometheus. But there's something special about it, something different. I held on to the name Tleppo as if I knew it was going to mean something eventually. It just stuck to me. Tleppo, from the stars. Violence. I was suffering at school and my home life was sliding back to untenable. I felt the darkness of Prometheus agitating inside of me, and my mind was in constant turmoil. My mother was ignoring my words and my dreams. It felt personal to me, deliberate even. I wanted change. I wanted to be a man. I wanted a voice and power over my future. I dreamt about emancipation, a concept I had heard about on the television. I wanted legal emancipation from my mother. With it, I would essentially be an adult, independent and free. I didn't have much more of a plan than that. Freedom, that's what I need, freedom. I had the confidence of perfect grades under my belt, and I wanted to expand. No more of this hokey self-help for dimwits called Scientology. I met my mother in our small hallway at home and came right out with it. "Mom, can I get emancipation?" I asked. The idea was abhorrent to her. She revolted immediately and shoved me down the hallway. "Are you crazy?" "No," she uttered. I felt guilty for asking her. She was clearly not expecting it. I slunk back into my room. This was the only time she ever hit me. She let her old boyfriend, JD, hit me with a belt when I got bad grades. She let Wally hit me with a paddle and worse. But we had never struck each other before. This incident was the only one and only time she ever got physical, and it was her shoving me. She was not a violent person, and neither was I. There was no violence in our home before or after that. I got the message. I was upset, but I can't say I didn't expect her to reject it. I just didn't expect the idea would be so vile to her. I need to find a different way out. I need to find something she can get behind. By the time I turned 14 in February, I knew how to get out from living with my mother and out of that school. I knew how to be independent and not have to do Scientology courses. And the best part was, my family would not only be content with it, they would be happy. I decided I would join the Sea Org Scientology's elite servants. I knew that Sea Org members didn't do much Scientology themselves. My mother would be proud. I was doing something for the corporation. I would get my own place and independence, and the pressure would be gone. I had no way to see what the cost of this idea would be. The repercussions from this decision permeate my life to this day.